Welcome, everybody, to NFA Live, Not Financial Advice. As usual, I'm joined by my distinguished co-hosts, Guy from Coin Bureau and Ben from Into the Cryptoverse. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So we had a bunch of questions lined up, and it was all about looking in the future. And it was all about, because when we kind of get into the minutia of the day-to-day operation, we kind of get a little bit lost sometimes. So I wanted to just take a look forward into potentially March 2024. Unfortunately, before we get into that, we have to talk about the PCE and things like that. And everybody, if you're not already subscribed or don't know who these guys are, I doubt that very much. But if you haven't subscribed to Coin Bureau Clips, there's a link in the description. Also, Ben's got a nice little channel, great information into the cryptoverse, so check that out. But before we get into the questions about, and we're going to take a look at utility, regulation, and of course, everybody's favorite topic, future price action, let's talk about this. And Ben, since you tweeted this, tell us what's going on and how is this going to affect the market potentially. It looks like PCE just came in hot, and not like a little hot, like a little bit more than what it was. Headline 5.4, estimated 5, core at 4.7, and estimation at 4.3. So Ben, tell us where we're at, what's happening, and where we're going from here, and then I'll talk to Guy.
Hey, yeah, thanks. So I think the general concern here is one of the things that we've mentioned before, and that was that risk assets can do okay until you see one of two things, right? And one of those is the reacceleration of inflation or the deterioration of the economy. And we hadn't really seen either of those. Unemployment rate still at a secular low. Initial claims just came in again yesterday, I believe. another week where they went down. So the economy still seems somewhat resilient. But because of that, you're potentially starting to see the reacceleration of inflation. Now, the reason why that's important is because it's likely going to make the market further reassess or reprice what the terminal rate is. And as of this morning, the likelihood of a 50 basis point rate hike is now, I believe, at 33%, 32.9, 32.9%. So it's giving it about a 33% chance or so, which still means the most likely outcome is 25 basis points. But the more important thing, I think, to look at, and you can see this on the CME Group website, is that the market is now no longer pricing a cut this year. The most likely outcome is just the Fed goes to 5.5 and stays there for the rest of the year. And if you think back to where we were a year ago, when we talked about the Fed funds rate, and we talked about, hey, like they're probably going to get to 5%, they might get to 5.5%. And for a long time, the market has not believed that, right? And Rob, if you want to click on, there's a little thing on the side that says probabilities at the top left.
This one.
Or no, a little bit down. Yeah, probabilities. So you can kind of see where the most likely outcomes there are for every month of the year. And you can see that no longer December is pricing in a rate cut anymore, which is a change. I mean, that's not the most likely outcome has basically just been a rate cut in December, and now it's not. The most likely outcome is still at 5.5. So my interpretation of this is essentially along the lines of, look, inflation is starting to reaccelerate a little bit, but if I'm honest with you, Rob, like I think the reacceleration of inflation would be a very temporary thing. Like it might just last a few months at most. I don't really see it surging for another like 12 months, right? I don't foresee us going to new highs in terms of year-over-year inflation. Like I'm not anticipating that. But where it becomes a problem is the Fed's reaction function, right? And what the Fed is going to do, what I think they're going to do is they're going to remain too hawkish for too long. And the reason why that's an issue is because if they do that, that's what could send us into a hard landing. So I think that's the reason we have to think about this stuff is will they go too high? Will it go on for too long? And if it does, then it just increases the likelihood that we see a more sustained or a larger pullback in risk assets in general. So that's kind of, I think, where we are. And then if we do see the temporary reacceleration of inflation, the Fed raises rates too high, higher than they really need to bring it down. then it could push us into a recession. But recessions are notorious for bringing inflation down very quickly, and then you could get into a very rapid disinflationary process.
Interesting. Guy, same thing here. And also I'm going to ask you another one, which is just what Ben talked about, how you think about that. And then, is this good for what you're doing as far as your investment strategy?
For my investment strategy, yeah, I mean, I think I've long assumed that we would go lower from here. I mean, it's a little early to call that now, just off the back of this figure. I mean, the market isn't taking it too well, but it's not taking it too badly either by the look of it. So let's see how it plays out over the coming few days. I mean, it does seem to make a bit more sense, really. I mean, I think markets have been fairly irrational the last few weeks, and I think this is a kind of timely reminder that inflation is still very much with us. It's not going to just magically disappear because the Fed has raised rates, and as Ben says, there are more rate rises coming. So yeah, it does. I'm certainly looking for it to go a leg lower before I'll be looking to get in. So it works for me on that score. But yeah, I think we just have to, and I think in terms of rate rises, obviously, yeah, we could go. It certainly will go higher from here. And I guess really it's a case of how long the Fed decides to keep us there. I mean, I think figures like this just go to strengthen the theory, the thinking that the Fed certainly won't drop rates this year. It won't pivot this year, which I think is something people still seem to be clinging on to. And this just confirms that that's not the case. So I guess there's a bit of certainty in there.
Yeah, I can see your points. And I got to tell you, when I saw Ben's tweet, I'm like, at first I was thinking to myself, I'm like, great, because this is what I really want to do. As far as dollar cost average, I wanted to actually buy things up. But isn't it amazing how like we have like this little mini bull run in a bear market, and everybody's like, it's over. That's it. We're gonna say it's a bull market, and that's what it is. And maybe it actually is. But when you see numbers like this, I think this is the test of time, and we'll see how it all plays out. But I got to tell you, if it keeps going up and the Fed becomes more hawkish, and our friend Jerome Powell comes out and says, you know what, we got to really put our foot on the throat of this, you're going to see the markets react. And of course, Fed overreacts, and then things go down. All right.
Well, Rob, one funny thing too, though, is that this happens every cycle, right? In 2015 and 2019, we always get ahead of ourselves with a pump, and then we always come back down, and then later we go up, and then we actually sustain it.
Ben, but that's what everybody wants. Everybody, like, this is the thing on the channel. Like, when I talk about positive stuff and just focus on the bull, everybody loves the videos. But man, when I go a little bit bearish, people are like, Rob doesn't know what he's talking about. He's an old man, doesn't know. So I'm like, well, okay, fine. So we'll see how it all plays out. I'm just trying to be careful. That's all it really comes down to. All right. So that was a little bonus question for everybody. Let's get into the questions that we came up with. So the thing, I thought about this, and I got these questions really from a couple of sources. And what I was looking at was a guy put out a video, and he talked about the craziest crypto hearing. And this is Congress as they came before, and they were just, I mean, I'll link this in the description. If you want to see some pretty negative aspects of where Congress and regulations are going, that was the hearing. Just happened about 8 or 9 days ago. And also, Ben put out a really great video, cryptocurrency worst case scenario. It's about an hour long, but it's great when you're walking your dog, you want to take a listen to something. And it's also quite scary as far as the worst case scenario. So I thought to myself, if these are the things that are happening now and a little bit in the future, let's just do that. So the question starts like this. It's now March 2024. So what's the crypto market sentiment, and how is the Bitcoin dominance? And I will tell you right now that the Bitcoin halving clock at Buy Bitcoin Worldwide has a countdown. Not to say that this is the exact date, because it's all by blocks, but they're estimating it at March 28th, 2024. So let's just say it's the 1st of March. And before we get into any of this stuff, me, Guy, and Ben, we are not fortune tellers. We cannot tell you what's going to happen or what it is. So take this with a grain of salt. This is not financial advice. That's the whole point of this video. So let's start with Guy. Guy, where do we go from here? What's the market sentiment and what's the Bitcoin dominance as we go through 2023? Whatever happened, you can fill in the blanks there into March of 2024.
Thanks, Rob. I think by this point, I hope, at any rate, that's the caveat there. I hope by this point we'll be coming out of a tough year. Rates will still be high. I would expect by this point, by a year from now, pretty much, I would expect the Fed to have either pivoted or be talking very strongly about pivoting.
Okay.
Like I say, I don't think we'll see a pivot this year, especially after figures like today's. So, yeah, I would imagine that that sentiment is starting to improve. Of course, markets are forward-looking, so any kind of
Right.
positive signs out of that from the Fed would be enough, I think, to really kind of buoy up sentiment in that regard. And I think the narrative around the Bitcoin halving, I fully expect that to play out as expected. And I think obviously by this point, assuming that the rest of this year is going to be pretty brutal, or certainly parts of it at least are going to be pretty brutal, I imagine a lot of people will have been kind of shaken out. There will be a lot of apathy around in the crypto market, but there will always be a hardcore of crypto enthusiasts, of investors, of people with infinite reserves of patience, like the three of us, sitting around and waiting for that sentiment to improve, waiting for things to pick up. And there will be more of us than there were the last time there was a halving. So I expect sentiment to be improving, and I expect people like us and hopefully many others to be kind of waiting on the sidelines in that regard. Obviously, this kind of assumes that we haven't had any more black swans this year. I should say any black swans this year at all. It makes a few assumptions. Like I mean, I hope the macro landscape has improved dramatically. I hope, for instance, by this point next year, the Ukraine war will be looking like at least there may be some sort of peace in sight, some sort of resolution to that. That could be pure hopium on my part. But I mean, yeah, I am expecting to see an improvement after a year of fairly sort of sideways price action for Bitcoin and the rest. Will we see a lot of Bitcoin, a high level of Bitcoin dominance? I think so, but I think it will be tempered by the fact that that there'll be a lot of money in ETH, possibly a lot of money in stable coins. But again, I mean, after what we've seen in the last few weeks with regulations, and that's, I think, going to be a big narrative for the rest of this year, regulators coming after stablecoin issuers. So yeah, I think a lot of that, there's a good chance that a lot of that market cap, a lot of that money that's currently sitting in stables could well have found its way into Bitcoin by that point. But like I say, I think ETH will have taken some of that, especially if kind of Ethereum's roadmap goes to plan, if stakers are able to withdraw a little later on this year. Again, assuming kind of nothing particularly bad happens with Ethereum. So yeah, I would be anticipating a gradual lifting of sentiment, a mood of much more positivity than we currently have right now.
Not too bad. So okay, before we go on to Ben, let me ask you this, because I mean, Guy, you've been around. When did you first start investing into crypto? Because I remember we talked about this in London, but it was what year did you get into?
2014.
Yeah, exactly.
So I discovered it in 2013 and eventually dipped my toes in 2014. This was just after, not long after Mount Gox collapsed.
Well, perfect timing, because honestly, it was at the pretty low point. So just real quick, because I wasn't around 2016, and that was we had a Bitcoin halving 2012. 2016, 2020. What was the sentiment like back then when we had this Bitcoin halving coming up? Because I wasn't around. I don't know what it was like. I can tell you what it was like in 2020, but not 2016.
I think it was, as I remember, gosh, casting my mind back a long time now. I remember there was an excitement about it, and obviously amplified by the fact that the community was so much smaller then.
Right.
I do remember there being some excitement around it, but I think there was a lot less understanding of of what it actually meant at that point. So yeah, and I think it was a kind of altogether slightly more lower key, certainly than 2020.
Yeah, because I remember, and then I'll get to Ben, but I remember I had Roger Ver on the show a while back, and he talked about the halvings and how much he said, because it was a smaller community, there was a lot of excitement. And of course, when 2016 came around, it was like going to be the next big thing. And then, of course, we all went through 2020, and that was like the big narrative. But it just kind of like it grew from, I don't know what it was like in 2012, but 2012, 2016, a little bit larger. 2020 was enormous, I felt. And then 2024, I think the sentiment is just going to be like, hey, this is the narrative, but I could be wrong. All right, Ben, sorry, as I'm droning on, let me hear from you. What do you got for this one?
As far as the halving, I was actually optimistic going into the halving in 2016, and then like right after it, the price dropped 20%. I remember that. I was like, oh crap. Because like, normally after the halving, we just kind of go up, right? Or at least, I mean, we'd only had one before that, but I mean, in 2020, we just, basically just went up. But yeah, back then we actually had a scare, and then it went up. So it was like maybe one last shakeout before it actually went on. But yeah, getting back to your main question. So it's March 2024, and so where are we at? So I guess to think about that, I'd have to think about like what is our path between then and now, or between now and then. And I think that, and in the context of the Bitcoin dominance, I do think you're going to see the dominance go to over 50% this year. I would guess somewhere between 50 to 55% is where I think it'll be at sometime this year.
Okay.
And due in large part due to the devaluation of the Ether Bitcoin value, the Ether Bitcoin ratio, and some of the other giants like the BNB Bitcoin valuation. We've already seen some of these fall. I mean, we've already been seeing some of these fall. And then another reason it goes up is because people see the halving coming, and they're like, well, let me get on my stable coins and put it into Bitcoin. I mean, that's another reason the dominance can go up even if the Bitcoin, even if altcoins stay constant on their USD valuations, the dominance can still go up a lot, as we've seen over the last 3 or 4 months. I mean, we've seen Bitcoin dominance go up, not because the market was going down, but because the market was going up. But yeah, so I think you're going to see the dominance go north of 50% next year, and early 2025. I think we're going to see it at 60%. To be completely honest, I mean, look, 2 cycles ago it was at 80%, 80, 90. Last cycle it went over 70. I don't know why it can't go over 60 this time. I mean, you're still looking at altcoin regulations. You're still looking at people who got burned a lot. I mean, in the last cycle. And normally we have to remind ourselves, I think we forget about this a lot. In early stages of the bull market, Bitcoin leads, just like it's, like it led the last couple of months. Like, you see what happens when Bitcoin goes parabolic, and everything else just gets left behind to some degree. And the dominance just shoots up very, very quickly. So I would sort of see it peaking around 60%, but not until late 2024, early 2025. So in March of next year, though, so I think we're going to have one more scare this year. And I think it's basically going to be nothing related to crypto. I think the contagion events have run their course. Maybe there's altcoin regulation, but I don't think that's going to affect Bitcoin. In fact, altcoin regulation might be better for Bitcoin. It might drive more money into Bitcoin if people are scared about some of the regulations for the altcoin market and the stablecoin market, for that matter, too. So I think that you're going to see one more scare, like we always see. We saw it in 2015. In 2019, it actually came the second half of the year, and then we had the drop in early 2020. We also have to remember, though, the halving this time around is earlier, and so it's going to be in early 2024. So my sort of path that I'm thinking about, again, probably not going to happen just because it's so hard to predict exactly what happens. But my path is that we could see just kind of like a dull year, where we get kind of a slow bleed. I mean, there's been plenty of excitement so far, so it's not.
Well, that's true.
But I think we're going to get somewhat complacent and apathetic, is my guess. And we're going to get one more scare to really test the resolve of investors. And then by the end of the year, so maybe by like Q4 I think Q4 at the latest is when we start to move back up. Because remember, the train normally turns back around before the halving gets here, not after it. So whether Bitcoin puts in a double bottom, a lower low, right? We'll have to see. But I do think no matter what, you'll see the train turn around later this year, maybe Q3 or Q4. And maybe the Fed does pivot this year. It's kind of almost like now that everyone's thinking it won't happen, it could lead to the problem now is that because markets are starting to believe the Fed, it could lead to the devaluation of risk assets, which could lead to some type of credit event. And if you get a credit event, it doesn't matter what anyone thinks. The Fed will pivot. I mean, they have to at that point. Otherwise, they're not just going to watch the economy melt down, right? So I think that you're going to see a Fed pivot either late this year or early next year. And when that happens, it should be all systems go for Bitcoin, because it'll be back to QE. Right? It's not that, I don't really think it's that complicated, to be completely honest. We just don't fight the Fed. I mean, if the Fed's printing money, risk assets go up. If the Fed's taking money out, risk assets go down. And in the same way that when we're printing money, we do have corrections, right? I mean, we have 20, 30, 40% corrections, even when we're in a period of QT or in a period of QE. When you're in a period of QT, you can still see 40, 50, 60% pumps, but it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to lead to new all-time highs until the Fed pivots. Historically, the stock market doesn't bottom until at least after the Fed pivots. So I think that's what we're essentially waiting for, right? I mean, I'm not saying that a DCA strategy is not worthwhile. I myself have picked up Bitcoin over the last half year. But at the same time, I'm not really under the illusion that, that Bitcoin's headed to new all-time highs this year. I think that it's just going to be a relatively apathetic year. But by March, I think you're likely going to start to I think we're gonna start to come into a crypto renaissance type phase, and the summer of 2024 I think could be really good for crypto. I think altcoins will be doing quite well by that point, and because normally by that point after the halving, Bitcoin sees a nice little pump, goes sideways, altcoins pop off. So that's kind of what I think the sentiment is going to be is actually going to be quite good at the time. I think we're going to be out from the depths of despair.
Yeah. So just taking a look at like the 2020. I mean, we had it. I think it was in May. May of 2020 was the halving, and look at that year. It was a great year. I love that year. 2020. I mean, we had at 9,000. Then of course, towards the end of the year, we had gone up all the way up to 30,000. Not that that's going to happen again, but like we see it here happen over and over again as far as the 4-year cycles. 12, 16. 20, and there it goes, and then who knows what's going to happen next. But I will say, there's two things. The guy had a good point about the stable coins. If things start to drain out of the stable coins, especially with, I don't know what's going to happen with Tether. I don't know what's going to happen with USDC. And we know what's going to happen with BUSD. And they're going to go down and say, we're not going to keep doing this unless Paxos wants to fight the SEC in court. That could happen. Mark Cuban did one, so who knows? But the thing that concerns me is that when we talk about the pivot, this is the thing that concerns me. We talked about this before. When the Fed pivots, then of course we have a little bit of a drop off because they broke something. We know they're gonna break something. That's pretty much their job. So if they do break something, and then here we go, now we're gonna have a downward slide. The question is then becomes, when do they pivot? So if they pivot, let's say like not this year, and then they pivot next year in 2024, and then the Bitcoin halving comes around March, maybe it gets pushed out to April. Maybe it all is really just good timing, because recessions last for how long? Roughly 10 to 12 months, 14 months, somewhere around there. And then maybe, because there's usually an all-time high after that. So maybe in 2024 is just like what we saw, I hope, over here. But again, who knows? All right, so that was a tough one. Now let's get into maybe some other easier parts here. Until we get to the price action where everybody loves. But this one, altcoin utility. So the thing that I take a look at with utility is, and we're going to grow as soon as we get some type of either a killer app or a killer utility, something that we just can't live without, right? When there was a transition, and I remember this transition from no internet to the internet, it was a slow process because there was just, first of all, it was slow. There was a lot of lag and people didn't know how to use it. Then when they figured it out, and we went from like a web 1 where it was just static to a web 2 where we could actually interact with things and actually pay for things online, then it really blew up. So for me, the question is this. In March of 2024, have we found the killer app use case? And what are people actually using altcoins for? And and we're on the same page about, you know, NFTs. NFTs that are just goofy little pictures are not going to do much for us to really bring mass adoption. That's just for speculation. That's just my opinion anyhow. And then of course in March, I mean, did Lightning take off? Did ordinals take off yet? And are we seeing a bunch of layer 2 solutions? So what do we got? And then Ben, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as the altcoin market, it's still, I'm guessing most of it will still be fueled by speculation of the dubious variety, of course. But I do. I mean, I think most of it is just going to be speculation. But I do think we are getting to the point where we are going to see real utility being developed. I feel it, to me, it certainly seems like we made progress from where we were back in like 2013 to then 2017 to 2021. Yeah. I think we're making progress, and I think we're going to make even more progress in the next cycle. So I do think you will see more utility come out. I think one of the areas is gaming. I think there's a good case there to be made that we'll see some type of crypto inclusion into the gaming sector. But again, it's important to distinguish that we need the gaming industry to include crypto. We don't need crypto bros going and creating some BS game and incorporating crypto into it, right? So that's what we need. So I think we're going to see more utility. And I don't really know exactly what all that utility is going to look like, to be completely honest. I mean, we always speculate what the narrative's going to be for the next cycle, but the truth is like, I don't think any of us would have, like, back in 4 years ago, so 2019, I don't think anyone was thinking that NFTs were going to be a huge thing in the next bull run. I mean, maybe you guys did, but they weren't on my mind at all. You know, so like I do wonder, I'm like, how good am I going to be at predicting what the next narrative is going to be? Because historically, I haven't seen the NFT narrative. So why should I see the next narrative? I mean, I do think a large part of it is just growing adoption. It's slow, right? Time is on our side, right? That's why I always say time is on our side, is just because there's so many people out there that are building during the bear market and during the recovery year that you're going to start to see all sorts of apps come out. And hey, with a high interest rate environment, it's going to force us to innovate, because with less access to cheap capital, investors are going to be a lot more cautious, I think, on where they put their money, because it's not going to be as obvious. When you think about a yield, like, everyone wants to get yield. And if there is at least a risk-free rate that is as interesting enough for people to consider, then it means that the use case for the cryptocurrencies that they're investing in really have to be there to support people's desire to get into those altcoin projects. So I like how you clicked on the dominance, not including stable coins too, because I think that that's a better way to look at it. But yeah, so I'm not really, I mean, I do think Lightning will do well. Ordinals, I don't really have a strong opinion on, to be completely honest. I mean, it's one of those things that I know has popped up recently and everyone's talking about it and everyone's excited about it. And hey, maybe it'll take off. To some degree, it almost feels like, and I know this, I'm not the first person to think this, but to some degree, you could argue that the altcoin market is sort of like a test net for Bitcoin. And you kind of see the exploration of NFTs, and then eventually some of that stuff sort of makes its way on over to Bitcoin. But again, I'm not discrediting the altcoin market. I think there's plenty of value there, especially Ethereum. I mean, I can't even imagine crypto without Ethereum, so I'm not trying to discredit that. But yeah, I think you will likely see some utility, but I don't think you're going to see a level of utility that's going to lead to like a completely new paradigm shift just yet, right? Like, I still think, look at what happened after the .com crash. You know, it took a while. It took several years. I don't think it's going to take as long as the .com crash to recover to new highs. I don't think it'll take nearly as long, but it might take 3-4 years before we really get that killer app to sort of lead us into a new, just a completely new era for cryptocurrency. I just think right now it's, recession talk, fear talk, right? We just got to survive this phase, and the coming years I think should be fun.
Yeah, just survive. That's the big thing. All right. Guy, what do you got? Is this? Of course I can't see it, but what do we see here? Like, what's the next big thing, or what is one of the big things for crypto moving into moving into 2024, moving into 2023 or 2024 or 2025?
I must say I agree with Ben broadly on. I don't think the time for the killer app is going to be quite upon us by that point. I think there's still too much work to do on the kind of infrastructure side, on things like user experience, user interface, and things like that. I think one caveat to that could be, though, and this is something I'm going to be watching quite closely this year. There's a lot of online censorship bills being introduced, and I think there's a big one coming to the EU in this summer, and I think the fallout from that could be fascinating. So one thing I am going to be watching out for, one particular sector I'm going to be keeping an eye on, is decentralized social media. I think kind of censorship overreach by governments that could bring us a killer app, or that could bring us a kind of killer use case. But yeah, will we see something in gaming? I'm not sure. Again, I agree with Ben. I think that could be a sector further on in the future that could quite easily bring us something amazing, something, a paradigm shift. And I must say that just kind of being out and about in the crypto community here in Dubai. I mean, I've bumped into a lot of people who are building stuff over the last few months. And a few people have been working on games, on blockchain games and kind of gaming ecosystems. And they've shown me things like gameplay. And I must say it's much better than I thought it would be. I'm seeing some kind of genuinely impressive looking stuff. So I am hopeful in that respect. I do think there is a lot of progress being made, but if it's being made quickly enough for this time next year, that I don't think so. So yeah, I wonder whether a use case for something like decentralized social media will be kind of forced upon us. I'm also,
probably.
I mean, I hope not. But I did a video on our main channel about some of these online censorship bills that are coming through. The UK's working on one, Canada's working on one, and yeah, it's worth taking a look at because it's scary stuff. And I think as people feel the effects of that, they're going to be looking for alternatives. So it is something to watch. Another kind of narrative that I'm just going to be interested to see play out come this time next year will just be the kind of layer one landscape in general. I mean, we had this news yesterday, didn't we, about Coinbase releasing an L2 for Ethereum,
right? Base.
And that that said a lot to me. I mean, I think that's big news for Ethereum, and it has had me wondering over the past day or so, what's the outlook going to be for other layer ones? I don't mean to say that Ethereum is going to necessarily crush all the competition in that, but I mean, Ethereum's growth is just so big, and the growth now of the layer 2 ecosystem, and this news from Coinbase just underlines it. That's something I think is going to be interesting, because which of these competing layer ones are going to survive? I don't think all of them can. So I think that could radically reshape the way the market looks, or be in the process of reshaping the way the market looks come this time next year. I think that, so yeah, that will be something that I'm watching. I'm also, in terms of things like ordinals and lightning. Yeah, I get the feeling ordinals is a bit of a fad. I'm not sure. I just find it difficult to see the Bitcoin community kind of embracing NFTs in that sort of way. And I think lightning has a lot more utility. Lightning, I think, is something that's needed much more. Growth on that has been pretty slow, but again, I think that is something that could take off. So yeah, that I think lightning is definitely worth keeping an eye on. I'm also kind of intrigued, Rob, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, because I know you've kind of looked into Sweatcoin a lot. But I think projects like Sweatcoin, these kind of move to earn, these ones that do appear to have some good inbuilt utility. I'll be curious to see how they're doing. Whether they could drive a narrative next year. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So, well, Sweatcoin, first of all, everybody, I'm super biased on this channel. I only talk about the things that I own. So if you're like, why is Rob talking about Sweatcoin so much? It's because I own a boatload of it. That's why. So that's just as transparent as I possibly can. Sweatcoin, they have a pretty good model, because just like with us, like you who are watching this video right now, you clicked on this video and you probably saw an ad. Hopefully it wasn't a scam ad, but there's an ad to be had. So with Sweatcoin, they have it two ways. They've been like between number 5 and number 1 health and fitness app globally for like the last 3 or 4 years. They've been around for like 7 or 8 years total. And all it is they would put it into your phone. I got it right here. You walk and you get these tokens, which don't really do much for you on the app, but you can purchase like different little things or get a discount. And of course, you're going to see little ads and stuff like that. So they monetize that part. Then they moved over to Web3, and they're like, well, those sweat tokens, not in the US of A, because, Gary couldn't get me with, he couldn't help me with BlockFi or Voyager or Celsius or FTX, but darn it, he really protected me from Sweatcoin. So thanks, Gary. So on that one, everybody else outside the US, they can actually transfer that into crypto, and they can use it for fiat pairs. So we'll see how that works out. But I mean, who knows? I think it's going to do well. But again, I'm super biased. And I will say just a couple of things. And this is like just a PSA for everybody. What these gentlemen talked about as far as with the Coinbase L2 solution that they came up with, because everybody's looking for Base, and it's not Base protocol. And I was looking at this yesterday. I'm like, why the heck did this project, which is ranked 2217, is in the 2000s, why did it do this from whatever the price is to all the way up to a year? It went up like 200%. It's because people thought that Base protocol was what Coinbase was putting out. They're like, oh, that's Base, I'm going to buy that. It's not. It's built on this. It's built on Optimism. And there is no token for Base. It's just an L2 solution. So just be aware. And I will say, just to add on to what Guy said and Ben, is that as far as like the decentralized network, I found this is Damus. I don't have any interest in Damus, but it is a decentralized. I feel like it's like a decentralized Twitter. And I found this from the people on Twitter who showed it to me. And this could be the decentralized option. It's kind of weird to get around, but that is one of those things it could do. And then the last thing, as far as like the big utility, this. And again, I have no interest in Oshi, but at the meetup yesterday at the San Juan Smokehouse, the owner of the establishment, Steven, says, hey, I want to show you, because I was talking about Lightning. He goes, well, this is what we use. They use Oshi. They use the Strike wallet, Strike, right? And you can pay for whatever it is using this Oshi app, and you get like Bitcoin. It's not Bitcoin cash back, but it's Bitcoin Satoshis back. And I'm like, well, I don't have anything in my Strike wallet. He sent me $5 from the time that he pushed the button to the time he turned around. I already had $5 worth of Bitcoin. I paid for my beers, which was very cheap, nice. And from there, he goes, what's great about this is it can come to my wallet, and I can transform it into whatever currency that I want it to be. And I said, well, what is the transaction fees? He goes, there's pennies on the dollar, pennies. And I said, well, how does that work with the other one? And he talked to me, and I know exactly what he's talking about. If you have a small business, online or brick and mortar, you're paying Stripe or PayPal or Venmo or something else, and you're taking between 2.99% or 1.99% per transaction fee. You are paying thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. And even here we have one called ATH in Puerto Rico, and that one is at 2.29%. It's what everybody uses because they're getting a great deal. If they could do that, that's the next killer app. And I just see the problem is, I think it was Ben who talked about the user interface. It's not the best so far. So once we figure that out, I think it'll lead to a bigger thing. That and gaming, I could definitely see, and I could use that right now. It's just that I can't figure it out. All right. So anyhow, so this part here, regulations. And again, I got to go back to this video that guy put out, which is really good. It was about the crypto hearing. Again, he put out a day ago. The hearing was about 9 or 10 days ago. And it was very negative, and it really all centered around the crypto collapse. So the question I have is this: in 2024, are we going to get some clarity? Is regulation okay, or are we still going to see some posturing? So, Guy, I got to start with you on this one.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. That hearing was pretty depressing to watch, I must say, and yeah, it was tough, and it just went to show that there are some strident anti-crypto voices out there, and that there are the battle on Capitol Hill, the battle for politicians who believe in crypto is ongoing. And I think I might have mentioned this last time. I think the whole business with FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried in particular has left a really bad taste in the mouth of politicians in Washington. Right. And I think that's going to take a long time. And of course, his trial begins October this year, if I remember rightly. So I think by March of next year, I mean, assuming it isn't kind of all wrapped up fairly quickly, by March of next year, a lot will have come out. There may still be stuff playing out in that trial. Who knows? So I think that's something definitely worth considering, and that could have altered the landscape a bit, quite a bit, because I think we're going to find out, just how cozy Sam was with various politicians. Let's not forget, of course, he met with Gary Gensler many times. And there could be some interesting stuff to come out about that. So I'll be watching that closely. I think we probably will still see a fair bit of posturing, a fair bit of just, I'm not altogether confident that they'll have got their act together. Obviously, by that point, 2024 is election year, so they'll be gearing up for that. And I mean, I think one thing I noticed last year was I think the attention of politicians in the US did kind of shift away from crypto in order to kind of focus on the midterms. And then sort of bang, as the midterms were over, FTX sort of came in to wrench focus back in the other direction. So yeah, I think I'm not altogether confident that there'll be any sort of coherent set of regulations in place by this time next year. I think that will still be being worked through. I mean, will we have seen an end to the Ripple case? This is. Do you know? I think we were talking about this a few weeks ago, and on one of these streams, and I made a really flippant remark. I said, I think the Ripple case will probably be wrapped up sometime around 2027. And at least two people in the comments that I'd noticed took me at my word and were like, "Really? You think 2027?" So
sure.
I did sort of, yeah.
I have that quote on my wall now, Guy. 2027.
That's why. Yeah, this is why Ben is dollar cost averaging XRP. So thanks, Guy. You know what's going to suck about that part right there? Someone's going to splice that into Twitter. And, oh man, I shouldn't have said that. Anyhow. Sorry, Guy. Keep going.
Stop giving him ideas, Rob.
Yeah.
Will this case be over next year? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think that it's with the judge now. I went and checked on Legal Briefs, Jeremy Hogan's channel, where I've been getting my updates about the SEC case. His last update was the finale, and that was posted 2 months ago. So, I mean, it's anyone's guess what is going to happen there. So yeah, I think we're still going to see we're still going to be having a fair bit of trouble with regulators in the US. And another thing that I'm very concerned about is this whole business of Operation Choke Point as well. This sort of concerted effort to cut crypto off from the banking system. I think that could have some pretty severe ramifications as well. Again, this is stuff that I kind of expect to play out over the course of this year, and I hope there'll be a sense that perhaps it's been worked through by this time next year. But who knows? Sometimes a year can go by very, very quickly.
Exactly. So yeah, we'll see how it works. But regulations, I'm not too enthralled or enthusiastic because I see the same thing. I'll get to it. But Ben, So the same thing here, regulations. I mean, we're here in America. I mean, we see it. We see it. Do you have any hope in 2024? Things like, yeah, we're moving in the right direction.
You know, I think that you're going to see some regulations this year, but my guess is we're still going to be stuck in sort of just wondering even in 2 years, because I think that these things just take so long to sort of carry out, and it's weird to me that it's 2023 and there really isn't that much more clarity on crypto than there was even several years ago. There's not a whole lot of clarity on what are altcoins, like are they securities or are they not. With regards to XRP, I could see a scenario where neither side necessarily can tout or claim full victory, but it could be a way that in which both sides sort of look at the more optimistic view from their perspective and claim victory, but both sides somehow claim victory. I could see a scenario where XRP at its launch could have been considered a security, but then maybe then it transitioned into not being one. I don't really know, to be completely honest. I don't spend a ton of time thinking about XRP anymore. I mean, I did quite well with XRP in 2017. And then in 2020, I bought it like 3 days before the SEC sued Ripple. So I'm still a little bit upset about that. But I think that you're likely going to see some regulation come in this year, but I don't think it's going to be like, it's still going to leave us with probably more questions than answers, to be completely honest. It's funny, if you look at the dominance of Bitcoin, which kind of tells the narrative going back from Bitcoin is sort of ruling to the altcoin market is ruling. And if you look at it without stable coins, what you'll notice is that we've been putting in lower highs, but we've also been putting in higher lows as well. I mean, despite everything, the dominance stayed higher. And if you connect those points and carry them out, they actually converge in 2026. So perhaps 2026 is when we'll finally get clarity on the altcoin market or not. And you can kind of see it just continuing to take several more years. And the funny thing is 2026 isn't even that far away. It's just 3 years from now, and 3 years go by very quickly. I mean, at the end of the day. So yeah, I think you're going to see some regulation this year, but we're still going to have a lot of questions. And then the other thing too is there's likely going to be new technology developed in the next couple of years that we're going to be wondering how that's going to be regulated. So even if they do regulate the market as we know it now, they might not have regulated the market as it might be in 2 or 3 years. Just like if they had provided regulations in 2017, there wouldn't have been clarity on the NFT market when it came around. So perhaps whatever the next thing is going to be the question as to what's going to be regulated in the future. But my guess, some regulations, but we'll still have a lot of questions even in the next bull run.
Yeah, I can see it. I will say this. So everybody kind of gets worried about, well, the government's so big and they can squash us, and we're just waiting around for them to just crush crypto so it can go to zero. Remember, I mean, in the days before the internet, I mean, the telephone service industry, AT&T, and the large conglomerates back then took voice over internet protocol to task, and they lost that case, and that's why we're talking right now. Instead of using a long distance phone call, which used to cost $4 a minute, now we're doing everything for free, and the world goes on. So don't despair. I think we got the better things ahead of us. And I will say this, as far as regulation, I kind of agree here, but remember in 2024, we're going to see a presidential election. I'm going to predict it. I have a feeling that Biden is probably going to lose. I mean, his ratings are, in as low as I think you can get. And people aren't really happy with what's going on. So I think he's a one-termer, which means that there'll be a Republican president, whoever that is. And I'm not very political. I mean, if you want to destroy your channel, just talk about religion and politics and it'll crush it. So I can see him getting out. But remember, Republicans, for right now that I see in the Senate and the House, they are the most agreeable for crypto and digital assets moving forward. So if in 2024 that happens, then the House of Representatives, they have their election as well. Probably Republicans will add to that. I'm not for sure. Senate, they get every 6 years. The big sticking point though is Gary Gensler, who watches the show, and he is there, I believe, till 2026. So that's the bummer of it. But I think moving forward, I think we'll go in the right direction. And that led me to my last point, and our last point, which is this. Let's talk price. Everybody's here. They want to talk price. So let's hear it. What do you guys think is going to happen for the price itself in March of 2024? We kind of touched on this, but Ben, I'll start with you. Finish up with Guy. What do we got?
I think we'll be trending in the right direction at least. And that's what people care about, not normally the actual price, but is it going up, right? If it's going up, everyone feels good, no matter what price it's from. I think if I had to guess, again, pure speculation, right? But if I had to guess, I would say by early 2024, so like March, April timeframe, around the halving, I'm going to go with, let's say somewhere around $28,000 to $32,000 for Bitcoin is my guess, somewhere around that level. But I also think that between now and then, we're going to, there's going to be a phase between now and then where we go back down and test the investors, because you typically don't get, because even though I say 28 to 30, around that level, I think it's going to go higher than that, right? I don't think it's going to stop there.
Right.
But what's likely, what I could see happening is sort of like sometime between now and then we get a massive, actually, it could just be a slow bleed. I mean, to be completely honest, it might not be a capitulation. It could just be a slow bleed for a while. And it causes some people to capitulate. And then we get into a slow move back up. And then by early 2024, 28K, maybe 30K, something around there. I could see it hanging out around 30K for a few months, actually, kind of like it did back in 2020 as well. It also hung out a little bit in 2016. And I'd hang out there for a little bit, and you'll likely see altcoins, popping off their lows, and doing quite well. And, everyone, and including me, getting on the altcoin bandwagon again. And then I think we'll head higher, right? And this is my general guess. But by the halving, I would sort of think about, because if you think about where Bitcoin was at its last halving, it was around 8,400, if I believe. So somewhere between 2 to 3x off the low. But we also have diminishing returns each cycle. So I would say it could be around similar levels off the low. So like if the low is 15K, then 2x off, that's 30K. If the low ends up being 12K or 13K, then it could be the mid 20s or right around 30K. But that's my general expectation.
Okay, Guy, before we get to you, Ben, I'm going to ask you about this one, because in your worst case, I want you to play it out for us. Everybody watch this video, worst case scenario for crypto. And I know you talked about July and August. You see some headwinds coming. Do you think that we're going to go, like I said, like lower, and then 2023 is going to kind of just suck and just be a slow bleed, and then 2024 is the better year? Or is there something in between? Just to clarify.
I think this is the year where both the bulls and the bears get wrecked. This is why I said, like, we all need to get sufficiently wrecked first before we can go higher. And that includes the bears, right? Like, that's an important caveat to it. The bears have to get wrecked as well. Just like the bulls do, because again, 2022 was just the bears just the bulls getting wrecked. And now I think it's both sides getting wrecked. So the people that are sort of waiting for the Fed pivot, we go through this phase where everyone's like, oh crap, am I getting left behind because I didn't wait for the Fed pivot? And you see the market pump. But look, the NASDAQ dumped 77% and the .com crashed and then pumped 60% and then slowly bled to a new low. So it could happen, and if you take the time ratios between the .com crash and what crypto has been going through, it would put us, getting one final scare by the third quarter of this year. So I think, like, my gut tells me that we're likely going to start trending up in a sustained way, like where we actually just keep putting in higher lows. And I know some people might say we're already in that phase, right? And I'm not, it's always a point to take. But my thinking is that you're going to have to see, we're going to have to be back at QE before we can really make that assessment, I think. So yeah, I think we're going to see a slow bleed followed by a slow increase into the halving, probably some consolidation for a while, and then maybe hopefully another parabolic run up, late 2024, sometime 2025.
Okay, so everybody remember that last phrase that Ben just said. We're going to go on a run up in 2024 because the other stuff people just hear. Sometimes people just hear like the bear stuff. Like, damn it, Ben's so bearish. But then really, honestly, in long haul, Ben is bullish. Guy, what do you have?
Ben has been bullish, hasn't he?
Yes.
He's been very bullish this stream. It's great to hear. I don't have an awful lot to add to that, really. I think, yeah, prices will this time next year definitely higher than now. I can see it, but I can see another crash or a slow bleed this year. I think we can certainly test those lows. For a year from now, my best guess for Bitcoin would be, it's quite a wide range, between 30 and 40K. I think I haven't got the courage to narrow my range as much as Ben has. So I'm playing it very safe there. But yeah, I think the excitement sort of building up to the halving, I think that can carry it sort of north of 30K. But I don't think, even if we're hearing noises about QE, even if the general overall macro picture looks better, even if the regulatory landscape looks better, I don't think that'll be enough by that point to push us, anywhere past 40K. But certainly, I think it's realistic to expect that sentiment could have picked up enough to be within that range by then.
Yeah, I'll just I'll push back a little. I think that whatever I don't know if we're going to go higher than what you guys just said, 30 or 40K, because I gave a prediction in 2020 that Bitcoin would go to 150K. That didn't happen whatsoever. But I will say this: I think that if regulation, if it hits its tone and we get some kind of clarity, that'll boost a little bit. The war in Ukraine, I don't think it's just like the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. It's just background noise as time goes on. Unfortunately, I have to say that. And we were in Afghanistan for 20 years. I don't think it's going to be that big of a thing in the market. It's going to be awful for the people over there. But as far as like price action, the thing that concerns me is what we just talked about, the pivot. If they pivot and it's not this year and it's next year, that means that the economy has really taken a big hit and they broke something. And it's going to take a little bit of while for them to bounce back. So maybe this time next year, it might be even worse off than we've seen beforehand. So I'm going to take a contrarian view. But before we get into the Q&A, I will just say this. I think I'm biased again because I'm dollar cost averaging and I want these things to go lower. And if it does, that's better for me. So maybe I'm wrong on that one, but it's just the truth. All right, everybody. So those were the answers. Maybe not. I think Ben was the most bullish out of all of us today. So So that part is
maybe long term. I'm not bullish this year.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. So we're good. So what we'll do now is go in the Q&A. God, we went almost an hour again. I don't know how we do this. But
Ben's bullishness makes this live stream collectible. So I think we need to mint it as an NFT.
All right, I gotta go double down on my worst case scenario videos now.
Yeah, we're gonna put this on an ordinal, and then Ben's gonna drop the worst case.
All right, I'll see you guys at 13K.
Nice, I'll take it. So here's a suggestion, and this was before the stream start. Hi, can you guys please create a YouTube playlist for NFA? Would make it way easier to keep track of this awesome format. So I did that on my channel. If you guys want to do that for a playlist for yours, so much the better. And then this was a good comment. YouTube playlist. Okay, did it. An audio and Spotify for all NFA episodes, please. I don't know. It's something we could think about. I never got into the podcast thing because I know we've talked to Guy about this and it's not the greatest setup, but whatever else. Here's a question. Can you answer this question? If all the collapses had not happened last year, FTX, BlockFi, Voyager, Celsius, where do you think the market will be today? It's a good question. And because we only went as low as 17,000. So do you think that we could have gone higher if it wasn't for just the shenanigans that were being played in the background with Three Arrows Capital and everything that happened before?
I think we could if you think back to where crypto bottomed in June and then where equities bottomed in October, and crypto was at Bitcoin was at 21K and then FTX collapsed, but equities did not collapse during that time. Actually, equities continued moving higher. And part of that, I think, is because net liquidity was moving higher from September up until about late January. Since then, it's been moving back down. So fair warning. But I think it could have been higher. I mean, you could have already seen Bitcoin tag slightly higher prices, but this goes back to the idiosyncratic risk of every individual asset class, right? So yeah, it could be just a bit higher, but I still think at the end of the day, we're fighting a losing battle until the Fed pivots.
I can see that. Guy, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I broadly agree with Ben again. I think perhaps we wouldn't have experienced quite the pain, quite the drops that we did last year. But I think we would still be going pretty low because of what the Fed's doing and because of inflation, etc. But yeah, it certainly wouldn't have been as painful as it was. But of course, on the flip side, if those things hadn't happened, all that crappy money would still be kicking around in the system. It would just be lining us up for an even more painful crash later on, perhaps. So I think perhaps although it was painful, it was necessary. I'm glad we've got it out of the way. I hope that's it.
Yeah, I hope that's it too. And then this is a good comment from August. The war is not background noise living in Europe. Russia may be going to Moldova. And it's true. So if I will rephrase that, it is not. It is awful for everybody around there. And I feel sorry for everybody. I've been through wars and nothing ever gets accomplished. That is for sure. Last couple ones. Robbie, would you guys admit to being too U.S.-centric in your economic analysis? I'll just say for me, because I'm a homer. I live here, and I will just say that it's because it's the things that I know, and that's one of my faults. Sometimes I take a view as an American citizen only, and not in different places. So yeah, I do, but you got to remember. I mean, if America goes away, it's not like crypto goes away. It'll just vacuum over to another place. It's just that we lose a big chunk of funds because America is the richest nation in the entire globe. So what do you guys think?
I am happy to. Yeah, I do admit I probably am a bit too US centric. I should look elsewhere, especially as I'm now based in the Middle East, which is where so much of the adoption is happening. So perhaps I should focus on that. But again, you can't get away from the fact that the world very much follows what comes out of the US. So I mean, we have discussed this, my team and I, before. It's like, should we cover what the Fed is saying this week again? It's like, well, yeah, because the effects are going to be felt, and if we felt that wouldn't be the case, then we wouldn't cover it. But yeah, I mean, I do admit we do focus on it a lot, but for good reason.
Yeah. All right. Ben, anything on that one? Just like, yeah, it's true.
No, I mean, maybe we should talk about more about other countries, but at the end of the day, I mean, like, the U.S. economy is the strongest, and that's where a lot of the money is. So, I live here. It's what I'm surrounded by. Yes, maybe I'm an ignorant American, but I mean, this is where a lot of the stuff happens. So I think it's important to focus on, and also I would say too, like, I focus on what I think I'm actually better at understanding. Like, I would not be great at talking about, like, monetary policy coming out of China or other places. Like, I don't spend as much time studying it.
That is true. All right. So guys, we're going quite long. It's an hour and 3 minutes. I'm going to stop it right here. So everybody, thanks so much for stopping by. We appreciate it. Again, you can find Coin Guy at Coin Bureau Clips, where he does a bunch of live streams, which are pretty entertaining if you like them. And then also Ben over at End of the Cryptoverse. That's it for today. So guys, thanks for stopping by. Appreciate it. And of course, we'll see you in the next one.
See ya.
See you, everyone.